Okay, today I want you to work on what does a vertical shift look like with different parent functions. So in each one of your slides, I have given you a parent function, but did added something to it or subtracted, or you'll see it looks a little different. I want you to take the parent function that I put in there and I want you to put it into Desmos. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into Desmos. And if it doesn't come up with the graphing calculator, go to the graphing calculator. And I'm going to look at it says f of x is equal to 1 divided by x plus 4. So I'm going to type that into here. Once again, you can bring up your screen calculator or your screen keyboard if you want. So f of x is equal to 1 divided by x. So there's the parent function. And maybe I'll leave it there and let's type in the other function so you can kind of see what the difference looks like. So f of x equals 1 divided by x. And I need to do plus 4. So I'm going to go over and do plus 4. All right, so now as if you can see this, the blue line is my new function. The red line is your parent function. On the screen, if we go back to our graph, I've already put the parent function in there so you can look at that when you bring your other graph in to answer the question below. So let's look at these. So go back to the graph, take your keyboard down. So first of all, we're going to copy the link. So let's go back up to the share, copy the link, and export the photo. Okay, so there's our photo we're going to have. We're going to download it. Now let's go back to our parent function screen. I am going to paste in my Desmos graph that I made. I'm going to hold off on the x and y intercept for a minute, and then I'm going to paste in my picture. So I'm going to go into images, downloads, and it's in my downloads, find the Desmos graph, and this is it. So I'm going to choose it. All right, so there is my other one. Now let's say you didn't want to have the red one in there so you could just look at the graphs. Go back to Desmos, close that out, and if you turn off by clicking on that button, you will just get the blue graph. So let's just do that. Once again, I don't need to copy the link. I'm just going to export the photo, and there's my graph. Okay, now let's go back. All right, so let's do that. Load that in here. Find it again, import that photo. Whoops, and I passed it. All right, there it is. All right, so let's just choose that one. All right, so they've made it really large. So I'm going to click on this one, delete it. I'm going to make this smaller so it fits over here. Still a little bit big, so let's just make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so we're going to look at those two things. So first of all, our y-intercept. So I think it's easier to see it on the Desmos graph. So close that out. Where does it cross this x-axis? So our x-intercept, it actually does cross. It crosses right here because here it's negative. If I click on that point, negative 0.25 and 0. It is crossing this x-axis. So I do have an x-intercept. So I'm going to remember that, or you could probably, yeah, just remember it. And then let's go back. I'm going to type that in. So my x-intercept is, and just type it exactly as you see it, negative 0.25, comma, 0, close my parenthesis. All right, let's see if we have a y-intercept. Let's go back to our graph. Well, we don't, because it keeps going on forever close to that y-axis, but it doesn't give us one. So we don't have one. We're going to type in none. Now your graph may look a little different. You might have one of these for some of them, maybe for all of them, maybe not. So you're really going to have to pay attention to your graphs. All right, the next question I asked is, what is the difference? And we're going to delete that part. So what is the difference between the two graphs? In your own words, what are you going to write? So if I look at this one, the red one, this is the parent function. Yours is labeled parent function. And I look at this one, well, to me, it looks like it moved up, right? This whole entire graph shifted upwards. So I'm going to put that. The graph shifted upwards. And if I go to the Desmos graph, I can actually see how far it shifted, right? So like here's my center, but how far? And remember it barely, so let's turn that back on. So look, it barely wouldn't go to 0, but what is it not going to in our y-axis? So when we look at this x-axis, what is our new x-axis? And it looks like it's like at 4. It will never go to 4 ever. And so it has shifted up 4 units from being at that 0. So it shifted up 4 units, and I'm going to write that. So the graph shifted upwards, and I'm just going to add 4 units. What else do I notice about it? Well, if I look at my equation, so if I look at my parent function is, and I'm just going to use y to save time. Well, we'll do f of x, is equal to 1 divided by x. But the equation I'm using now, so the vertical shift is f of x equal to 1 divided by x, but I added 4 to it. So what I do notice is whatever I'm adding to this is how many units I'm going to shift up. So what I add makes my graph shift up that many units is what I'm going to write. What happens if it was a minus 4? Well, I'm going to assume if it subtracts, then it would shift down that many units. Let's just test it out. I mean, you don't have to do that, but just be aware that's what's happening. So let's go back here. What if this was minus 4? So let's just make a new one. Look at that. It'll change the color, so that's why I want to do a different one. So f of x closed equals, we'll do 1 divided by x. Okay, now that one's green. But what if we subtract? So I got to move over to make sure I'm not doing it with the x. So it's like the whole function subtracting 4. Let's just subtract 4, see what happens. Okay, lower that keyboard. All right, I'm going to shift my graph up to look. All right, look, it does. It moves it down to this -4. So that is, later you'll learn, is called an isotope. So it doesn't ever go past there. And so it did work that way. So it moved from the red graph 4 units down. And if I went to the blue graph and I added 4, I went 4 units up. So when you do this, each one of your different ones, you're going to have 5 different ones. You're going to see what happens to your graph. Does it move up? Does it move down? And each one of them will be different. So check it out and see what you can figure out. And this is kind of just a good thing to know how to do or understand graphs a little bit more and what happens to them and why we have parent functions. So, all right, that's what you're going to be doing today.